Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
Being a fintech company in banking, it's very hard to generate revenue fully digitally from end to end. And we're one of the only, if not the only providers that can actually do that. You implement with us, or we implement with you rather. From that moment on, you're generating revenue in your digital channel for the first time, more than likely ever. In our world, deposits are extremely expensive. Cost of funds are going up. Deposits are coming in the front door, leaking out the back door for better rates somewhere. We've got, a Fed that might decrease rates, all this rate hype, right? Well, how do you get your customer to actually stay with you and actually generate profitability within a short amount of time? Because you don't have much time with them. That's really what makes us super different and what's helping us be really successful the last 2 years.
That was Parker Graham, founder and CEO of Finotta, and he is my special guest on this episode 291 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. Finotta uses personalized financial guidance to drive digital growth for financial institutions. Finotta embeds their products and features into digital banking channels to create a personalized experience that predicts the bank's customers' needs, which in turn increases product conversions and delivers actionable guidance in an all-in-one solution. Parker and I talk about Finotta and what makes it unique in the marketplace, as well as Parker's professional journey and his passions. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Parker. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
You bet, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. If you don't mind, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that, and then we'll circle back to your professional career in just a minute.
Yeah, you bet. Greg, I grew up really as a Midwestern guy. Grew up hunting, fishing in a little town in Southwest Missouri. Just was always involved in sports, always involved in the outdoors, like I said, and left the Midwest to go to college in Oklahoma. So I guess it's still kind of the Midwest, and went from there to a bunch of different places. I've been to Baltimore, back to Oklahoma, up to Kansas City, and my wife and I and our kiddos all live here in Kansas City now.
Well, let's talk about the company. So tell the audience what Finotta does.
Yeah, so Finotta is basically a company that came about with the real surgence in personalization technology. Everything that you see, do, touch, at this point is really personalized to you and who you are as a consumer, as a spender. And really the only place that doesn't exist is in banking technology. And so back in 2020, I had a software company that was doing more direct-to-consumer type of tech and helping people eliminate debt and try to get out of debt. And what we realized with our customers was that every single one of them was asking us to have our technology in their bank or credit union's app. And so I'm an old football player. I played both college for Oklahoma State and pro for Baltimore. You have to tell me something a couple of times before I get it because I've been hitting the head a lot. But user after user basically kept coming back to us and saying, man, can you put this in my bank's app? So that's exactly what we did. So Finotta basically is an embedded fintech company that allows really any bank or credit union, doesn't matter what size they are, whether they're 100 billion in assets or $1 billion in assets and everything in between. It allows us to put personalization technology directly in their mobile app specifically. And what it does is it basically figures out what financial journey your individual user is on and figures out what products and services that they currently have and maybe don't have in some instances, and really cross-sells and upsells those products that the bank wants to sell to the customer in a completely digital way, all while improving the financial health of the end user. Basically helps them go from point A in their financial journey, which might be debt recovery or just building a business or building an emergency fund for the first time, to point B, the next financial journey. And if you can imagine that over the lifetime of a banking customer, right, there's tons of journeys to go on and tons of journeys to be on. It's really difficult for a bank or a credit union to service all of those different unique instances at scale. And so that's really why our company exists, is to do that for both the end user, making their financial life a better scenario than it was before us, and also helping the institution really come into the 21st century and start making digital revenue with their customers.
So I assume your customer is actually the bank, not the end user.
Correct. Yeah. So we're interesting in the sense that we are definitely purchased by the bank or the credit union, but Really who we pay the most attention to, though, is the end user. And that's because, as with anything technology-based that deals with a phone, that front-end user experience has to be pristine. It cannot act like a bank built it, which is something we actually pride ourselves on. I don't know if you have opened your bank's app in the last day or so, but if you open that and then open Instagram, it's going to look very, very different. It's going to function differently. It's just not built the way that we're used to apps being built. When our clients, the banks, take on our technology, like I said, we embed it directly in their user experience, and it has a lot of the functionality that you're used to, right? It reflects who you are as a consumer. It augments itself and helps you depending upon your unique financial journey, which is really how everything else works in this world. And we just basically took that and put that in this unique instance. And it's been really exciting. The other cool thing about having the bank be the customer, but the end user being the real driver of everything is that we get to actually directly impact the financial lives of tens of thousands of people at this point, which will be millions soon in the future. And it's just really cool because we're direct one-to-one. Like when a user uses us, their financial life is better in some form or fashion. We call it lives changed internally. It's a beautiful kind of rising tides lifts all boats environment that we get to live in every day.
It makes a lot of sense. So as a consumer, I log into my mobile app. Is there sort of a setup? Like, do you ask questions that helps you determine the personalization? Like, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Or how do you know what journey they want to go on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's definitely something that's a little bit more advanced than that. So our algorithms basically figure out what journey you're on right now, completely automatically. So the moment you touch our tech, we are in the bank's app. So you go into the bank's app, there's typically a button that's in that homepage. That's us, but we're white labeled. So consumer doesn't know that, but the interface does. And once they click that, our technology goes in and looks at all the transactional data that's out there, all the different accounts that you have at that institution, and makes a bunch of inferences off of that. And then from there, the user interacts with the system and basically it self-adjusts to what the user's wanting to work on. So kind of like what you mentioned, they might want to do a financial journey that's, specific to them, but they might actually need to fix some things in a different one first, kind of augments to that. And really, again, at the end of the day, wherever the user is at point A, we're trying to figure out how to get them to point B. And that might be a savings goal. It might be, paying, building some wealth in some form or fashion, and really everything in between.
And do you go to market with like a direct sales force? Do you work through partnership channels or a little of both?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. We've been at this for 5 years now. So we've got great relationships across the entire fintech ecosystem, everything from, publicly traded digital banking providers that we work with very, very closely to global providers who work with everybody from folks in the States up to Canada, all the way over to Europe. So we've definitely really just scratched the surface, in my opinion, of where we're trying to go. And as a person who's been doing this for 5 years, that's a really fun way to think about things because there's always more people that you can help and there's always more institutions that need help. And that's exactly why we exist and why we're really excited for this year. It's the beginning of 2024 and it's going to be our biggest year. It's a lot of fun being in the seat that I'm in, getting to see that every day.
So what would you say differentiates you guys from your competitors out there?
There's a couple. The first one is just really actions-based insights versus more past tense historical events. And what I mean by that is you probably opened up an app before and it says like, hey, looks like you spent $400 at Starbucks last month. You shouldn't do that. That's terrible. You lost $10,000 in the stock market by doing that if you would have just moved your money over here. Have you ever seen anything like that? They call it the latte factor.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So our technology doesn't work like that. It's much more action-based. So it's next best opportunity. So I don't care that you spent $400 last month at Starbucks. What our technology cares about is where your next $400 goes. And so it's just a complete different shift in how we're approaching user behavior and how we coach our users to make the next best financial step in their life. So it might be, user comes in and our tech automatically knows, okay, hey, you need to put $25 extra this month to this Amex card versus paying $25 to your student loan. Here's why. Do you want to make that decision? Yes, I do. Great. You can do it all here within the application. You don't have to bounce out to your Amex provider. You don't have to bounce over here to this provider. It all is encompassed in the environment. And then on top of that, maybe we find that you need an account right then and there at the institution. And we can actually open that account right then and there on core, which is a fancy term for saying that we've messed with enough legacy dinosaurs that we can actually do some fun things in that stack. and really just make the user experience easy for the customer, for the user. That's probably the biggest differentiator, I would say, is just action-based decision-making versus insights-based decision-making. The other thing that I'll say is that our technology is built in the last, 2 years. A lot of the folks that we go up against, their tech is about 15 years old and it acts like it. It's very unfair if you put an iPhone 15 that I have in my hand here and an iPhone 7. Those are very different technologies, right? Like very different hardwares, very different operating capacities. And that's just the beauty of being who we are, is that we're younger, we're nimbler, and we're able to move really, really fast with technology that was built and really is here to do what banking technology should be doing, which is making life easier for the user. They shouldn't have to think about, at this point, we have so much transactional data that it's really not hard to figure out where people need to put their money. It's a lot harder to get people to really entice them to want to use you as that single source of truth, right? And so for us, that's really the whole entire game that we're playing here, is really getting users enticed, helping them with their financial health, and then in the same breath, helping the institution be able to figure out, okay, this amount of customers need this product, this amount of customers need this product, and we do that fully automatically without a customer ever having to come into a bank branch, which again, Greg, I'm going to guess here, the fact that you're doing a podcast, I'm going to guess you don't go into your bank's branch very often, if ever. Is that fair?
That's a very fair thing to say.
That's the thing, right? And most institutions, they aren't equipped to handle that kind of customer. And, we're one of the ones that's really helping them figure that out. And then the third and final is really a byproduct of number two. And that's, we actually generate revenue digitally. So being a fintech company in banking, it's very hard to generate revenue fully digitally from end to end. And we're one of the only, if not the only, providers that can actually do that. You implement with us, or we implement with you rather. From that moment on, you're generating revenue in your digital channel for the first time, more than likely ever. I mean, in a world where, in our world, deposits are extremely expensive. Cost of funds are going up. Deposits are coming in the front door, leaking out the back door for better rates somewhere. We've got, a Fed that might decrease rates next year. Just all this rate hype, right? Well, how do you get your customer to actually stay with you and actually generate profitability within a short amount of time? Because you don't have much time with them. That's really what makes us super different and what's helping us be really successful the last 2 years.
Well, where do you see this part of the, if you want to call it the overall fintech or payments industry, but where do you see it headed in, say, maybe the next 3 to 5 years?
Ooh, man, how long do we have on this podcast? I think I got a lot of theories. Let's just talk about like the industry as a whole. So like just financial technology and really where I think it's going. I think it's going even more so to automation than it ever has before. You have AGI coming out. You have large language models that are making things easier and easier and easier and easier to get customers to not only get them, but make them have a great experience, right? I'm sure you probably have had a conversation with a bot today and you didn't even realize it was a bot. Like that's how good these things are getting. And I think really digitizing the sales force for banks in the banking industry, and whether that's banks or fintechs, neobanks, whatever it might be, it's just speed to automation. It has, I don't know about you, but I feel like that has just 10x'd in the last 16 months. Mm-hmm. I really like the next year, the applications for AGI and what ChatGPT is doing and some of the other big providers out there, it's going to completely revolutionize everything that we do. I just think it's going to be exciting to figure out which parts have the most benefit, right? I think about in our vertical, the way that a user sees Finotta in our system is called the financial coach. That's the user experience they see from the bank, right? It's called the financial coach. And that financial coach is built more so on machine learning technology, not AGI. And so as we think about okay, how can we automate and make these experiences even better, adding some of those functionality pieces in there that automate that conversational piece and make it even better to where a person really feels like they have a person in their app that's looking out for their finances. I mean, how cool is that, right? 5 years ago, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, if you were a middle class average American, you had no hopes of having financial advice from anyone but your mom, your dad, your uncle, your aunt, someone that you had close proximity to, but you couldn't afford to go to a financial advisor and spend time and get a really good outlook on your finances unless you had money. In the future, that's not going to be the case. Anyone's going to have access to the entirety of financial history and be able to use those things to make themselves and put themselves in a better spot. That's what gets me really excited, is that you'll have a lower class American be able to become an upper level income class American simply by the fact that technology has moved so fast in their lifetime and has given them the opportunities and tools to do so. It's going to be really fun.
So things like blockchain and Bitcoin, all those things really, for your business, don't really play a huge role, right?
So the way that we look at those technologies is a whole lot less, we're not going to use those, and a whole lot more, how can we continue to evolve into the organization that our clients need us to be, right?
Right.
So you mentioned blockchain, and I like to think about smart contracts, right? There's a lot of application for smart contracts when it comes to, let's just say, like a regional banking institution, right? You got folks and you have clients at those institutions that are doing, tens of millions of dollars a year in revenue, doing thousands of contracts, thousands of accounts receivables and accounts payables transactions. You apply, blockchain or smart contracts onto those and improve the security, improve the payability of those. I've got a bunch of examples of like rural contracts where like you're dealing with, hard assets that people can skip town on, right? And in the blockchain world, that really can't happen, right? Because you have the accounts, you have them sitting there, and you have the funds, the ability to cross those payments instantaneously. I think that those types of tools are going to be something that we're going to be definitely paying attention to, whether it's a part of our platform in its current iteration, probably not. But as a company, this is not just one product that we're going to build, right? We're going to build and continuously build products that make sense for our customers. And so it could be something that we build in the future for sure.
All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So you mentioned you played college and professional football. So maybe catch us up from leaving the NFL, maybe taking your first job to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was very blessed. I got to play in the NFL for the Baltimore Ravens, and it was an amazing experience. But I quickly realized, just by being around my teammates and kind of seeing the financial lifestyle and financial habits that a lot of them had, that I had a calling to do something in finance. And so I actually left the league and went directly into wealth management. I worked for a $70 billion asset manager. It was a part of a $40 billion bank based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Bank of Oklahoma, or BOKF is the publicly traded company, and worked there as a wealth management, high net worth wealth advisor, specializing in all kinds of fun stuff, from financial planning to alternative assets and really everything in between, a lot of analytical work. And really just got to live that dream of helping people with their wealth and really helping people get better money habits, figure out how to make their wealth last as long as possible. The only problem was that I grew up, as I mentioned, a small Midwestern, guy small town, excuse me, not small, I'm 6'7", so small town Midwestern guy, and carrying a briefcase and wearing a suit every day is what I thought was going to make me feel important. And it just wasn't. I felt this calling to really build a business that could help people like the folks that I grew up with, right? Helping people get from 0 to 1, not 1 to 10, right? And I felt a real big spiritual calling to building something like that. So in 2017, I started figuring out what that business was going to be. And I looked around, and I was actually leading our IPOs and doing a lot of analytical work on all of our IPOs that we were investing in as a firm. And was reading all these founder stories about these 20-year-old wonderkins who, founded a company when they were 18, 19, 20, 22 and had IPO'd by the time they were like 26. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, I've read enough of these. If they can do it, I could certainly figure something out. Lo and behold, I did not IPO by the time I was 26, but, it gave me that drive and that fire to go build something that was bigger than myself. That was a company that was the previous iteration of Finotta, and it was called Destiny. Destiny Wealth was the name of it. And basically I ideated on that in 2017, got the guts to leave the company and start it in 2018. And like I mentioned, I left that company with, I think, $50,000 in my pocket to build a company for the masses, and very quickly realized that, number one, that's just very infeasible to try to build a company, a software company with no experience, no idea what you're doing, and also very, very little money. Quickly ran out of money, got a part-time job working at a liquor store. I love telling that story, just to make ends meet, and ended up having to go work for a bank at a certain time just to make ends meet even more. And was building the company on the side. And 2020 rolled around, continued listening to customers, and started working for a bank, like I said, and saw the problems in banking technology. And late 2020, early 2021, made the pivot to what is now Finotta. Ever since then, we've found our niche and have brought this personalization really to the forefront. It's actually a term in the industry now, which is kind of interesting. It's something we've been talking about again since 2020, and it's now like a industry vertical, which is kind of cool to say. Even though we're still a small company and we're still trying to get big as some of our competitors. It's something that we created, and the job's just not done. We've got plenty of work to do. There's 10,500 financial institutions out there, and we're trying to go be of service to any and all of them. But that's really how we got from pro ball to where we are today.
Awesome. Well, what are some things you're passionate about? So maybe one personal passion and one business passion.
So I'm a girl dad, first and foremost. I'm blessed with 3 beautiful daughters and really a family man at heart. When I'm not working, I'm typically with my family doing just, typical dad things. It's funny. I played football, but I'm probably the last person that you want to take to a football game because I'm just going to sit there and analyze the whole time. So I'd much rather, I like watching it in the comforts of my home with the announcers off. But huge fan of sports, love sports, anything. It doesn't matter if it's cricket or whatever. If it's on, I'm happy. And really, probably biggest passion, like outside of those things, is really fishing. It's kind of like my solitude and weightlifting. Those are my 2, call them my moments with God, because there's just nothing else going on. It's just, the weights moving or the fishing line going out. And as I mentioned before, I'm a Christian. So like those are my moments to just kind of be in solitude, if you will, with the Lord. And that was probably it. You don't get to have a whole lot of hobbies when you do things like this, when you start companies. So they're very few and far between.
Yeah, that's why I don't ask about hobbies. To me, it's the passion question can be a lot of times the business and the personal passion when it's a founder of a company are very similar. So how about your business passion? What part of running this business are you most passionate about?
Oh, people, 100%. I mean, it's not even close. There's not a close second. There's 2 ways that comes. The first one is the people you get to work with every day. We are very blessed to have an incredibly talented team. Without, our company would not exist. No company is one person. I might be the face. People might see me at conferences speaking, but there are, an amazing group of people behind and with me that make our company fun to go to every single day. That's 1,000% like the most important part of what I do. That's kind of where I get my most fulfillment. That's a perfect word for it. Absolutely. And then to piggyback off of that is the people we affect, right? So it's the people internally that you get to work with every day. And then it's the people that you affect. Now, it doesn't matter what job I've ever been in. It doesn't matter if I was playing football or stocking, whiskeys on aisle 6 at the liquor store, right? The conversations, the impact that is driven when you can wake up every single day and realize that your technology somewhere, someplace is helping someone do something better than they did the day before. There's nothing better on this earth than that. I mean, not only that, this is something I talk about with our team all the time. It's a whole lot less about even who we affect on a daily basis, but it's the ripple effects of who we affect on a daily basis, right? So it's the mom that we're helping figure out what to do with her credit card debt so that she's in a better spot when her kids need to go play in a basketball tournament somewhere and she's got to shell out $600, right? It's like those ripple effects. It's the person who started a business and is making really good money, but needs to figure out how to make the next step, right? Those are people that we get to affect every day. And that's not only a great byproduct, but it's an incredibly important responsibility. And the combination of those 2 things is by far what get me excited to get up and do what I do every day. And a lot of times way late into the night, but those are what make it worth it, in all honesty, every day.
Okay. Well, this final question is around the people side of the business or the industry. And, if someone's coming to you and they say, hey, Parker, I'm interested in joining your company and I really love this fintech space and what it's doing. And, there's so much money being invested in it. And it's a great place to build a career. So he or she comes to you and says, what do I need to do to be successful in my career in fintech? What would you tell them?
There's a lot of ways to think about how to answer that question. It really depends on like where you want to be. So do you want to be at a startup like a, Finotta, or do you want to be at like a bigger player who's raised, Series D capital, like a Bond AI or something like that, right? Very different experiences from a working perspective. So that'd be the first kind of understanding I would have to have. If it's the, startup mentality, like the startup, I want to go work at an early stage startup, you better get ready for the biggest education that you have ever had, and literally things that you never thought you need an education in. It is the fastest route to growth and employability, I would say, because you just learn so much in such a short time frame. I bet if you would ask any of our employees, they would probably say the exact same thing. Like they have learned more in a faster time than any other thing they've ever done in their life, right? Because it's constantly moving. You're constantly dying. You're constantly like trying to survive. And when you're in that fight or flight moment, your only option really is to fight. And so you have to kind of figure out who you are. And it's a huge blessing in all honesty, because anywhere else you go after going from a startup is kind of easy, to be completely honest with you, because if the paycheck's coming every single week, Greg, like it's not that hard. Like you got to do some spreadsheets, you got to make some sales, and that's great. There are people that works for, and that's awesome. Go do your thing. And if that is how you are, startups are not for you. So that's kind of like why that's the first, delineating factor. The second one, where you're working at a bigger startup, right? Startups that are kind of trying to make their way towards IPO. So if you're looking to do something like that, and it's more competitive to get into that startup, right? Because they have so many more employees, there's more like specific roles and titles. If you're kind of fresh and green and don't really know how to do that, like the first thing I would do is message the founders. Like, I don't care how long the startup's been around, if you will message the founders, as long as they're pre-IPO. Once it's past IPO, there's, is the founder still there? It's probably more difficult. But if there's Series B, C, D, I would literally find something that you can solve for them. It might be like, hey, I saw this article and you guys were talking about this being a pain point. I went ahead and solved it for you. It's a terrible example, but something like that, where you're providing value and showcasing in this outreach, like what you can do, right? So it doesn't even have to be something that like you actually can have a whole lot of knowledge about, but you're just like showing them like, hey, I can do stuff and I want to do it for you. And you should offer to work for free. Like if you're brand new in your job and you're trying to break into an industry, there's no better way than to prove yourself to people, because they will give you shots. They will give you opportunities. Reach out, tell them something that you can do, show them something you can do, and then say, listen, I'll work for you for free until I earn a spot. And that right there shows a lot about the kind of character that you are. And if you're really not that character, you'll flame out, right? So like, it's kind of a beautiful double-edged sword, because for the founder at that stage, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to get some free work. I'm going to really see who you are and what you're about. And if you prove yourself, then shoot, it's really easy to find a role for you. So those are kind of the two ways that I would kind of think about, depending upon where you're reaching out and how you're kind of going about wanting to break into that industry and the kind of company you're trying to get into, especially in fintech.
Yeah, I think it's very powerful advice. Well, Parker, we've covered a lot of ground, obviously, about the industry and about Finotta and what great work you guys are doing there, and obviously about your professional and personal journey. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up the show?
Honestly, I think that I'd like to end on is just really about where the industry is going. You kind of clicked into it. I just want to double click into it real quick. There's been a lot of conversation in our industry specifically around like AGI and ChatGPT and a lot of these AI models that are going to be coming out. And I just got to say, there has not been a better time to get into financial technology. It's becoming easier. It doesn't matter what vertical you pick to. It could be in bank technology like what we're doing on. It could be in payments. It could be in crypto. It could be in anything. All these things are going to move at Mach speed from this point forward. The reason why I say that is it's taken us 5 years to get our tech to where it is today. If you were starting our company right now, it would take you half that time with the tools that are already available. So if you're thinking about doing anything in this industry, if you're thinking about trying to dip your toe into the water, or as Greg said, getting a job somewhere, this is the time, because 5 years from now, financial technology is not going to be even close to the same as what it was, which is something I'm super, super excited for. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are too. But if you're trying to get in or thinking about getting in, the time is now.
I think that's a great way to end the show. And Parker, I know your time is very valuable, so I want to thank you for being here and really do appreciate your time today.
You bet, Greg. Thanks for having me.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.